Hey guys, welcome to another MapleStory 2 video, and today is going to be the Assassin class guide. The difference between this one and the Assassin class review is that this one's actually going to teach you how to play the class, everything you need to know about him, how you want to build him, how you want to spec him, etc, etc. I'm also going to show you what every skill does, and it gives you more of a general understanding about how to play the class. I'm not the best assassin in the world, but the information I have should be enough to at least get you acquainted with the class and whether or not you want to play it yourself. The short answer about whether or not you want to play the class is entirely up to you. I personally do love the class. I think it's a great class. It's really fun. It's just that I don't think it's probably not the most friendly class to play for like very big beginners, because there's a lot of stuff you have to do more on a rogue class like Assassin or Thief than you would a Berserker or Archer and such. Okay, anyways, let's get into the skill build first, and then I'll cover the rest later. The basic skill that you have, we'll go over the Spirit Regeneration and the Mobility. For us, we have Dash. Dash is a really simple 4.5 meter dash skill, and it just like sends you flying a decent amount. It doesn't do any damage or anything, but you can use it 3 times within a full spirit bar interval. It's really good because it's fast and fluid. It's not like one of the other dashes that are quite slow or clunky, like Berserker's dash or even like, let's say, Heavy Gunner. Not the farthest dash I've seen, because Rangers have Eagle Glide, but they can only use it once because it consumes 80 spirit versus 40. So it sort of evens out, and I like it because mid-range dashes are really good for a class like Assassin that needs to reposition from time to time, in between attacks too. Spirit Regeneration for Assassin is not the greatest, but the thing is we don't use that much spirit as a whole. So what we have is Shadow Chaser, which sends kind of like a shadow to the nearest target, and it marks them, and it does just a little bit of damage. Or is that my pet? I think that might be my pet. Let me turn that off. I forgot how I deactivate this guy. There you go. There you go. So no, there, yeah, that was just the pet. It just does a little bit of damage, and it also marks them with this little icon right here, and it restores 1 spirit every 0.1 seconds, so it restores 10 spirit per second. It's not bad. Not the worst spirit regeneration skill there, but it's not the best either. It lasts 30 seconds, and you can apply them on multiple targets. So let me see if I can get this guy right here, and this guy right here. So all 3 of these guys are giving me spirit, which means the more the targets you can hit with the Shadow Chaser, the more spirit you'll be able to regenerate. But for the most part, you just only need to hit 1 target, because that's enough spirit for you to get. Alternatively, some people don't even hit a target at all, but it is good to have at least 1 target that you tag with the Shadow Chaser. It would be a lot nicer if this thing could pass through enemies, so you can tag multiple targets at the same time with just 1 cast, but it's not too bad. Okay, so our first ability is Lucky Stars. I'm gonna move this over here because that's my macro key. It basically throws 2 stars each, it throws 2 stars each, and the damage is determined by both of your weapons. So some skills for Assassin, the damage is calculated only by 1 weapon, and others is calculated by both. Lucky Stars is both, and the way it works is that it bounces onto the nearest enemy, or like if there's any enemy within 3 meters, then it will bounce off to it. So I'm targeting this guy right here, and it should bounce to these 2. I believe it only targets 1 person, but usually it's in the angle or direction that you're facing. So since I was standing over there, it hits this target. If I attack over here, okay, I guess not. It only goes after 1, I believe. I don't think it attacks multiple targets, although I might be mistaken. Yeah, so it does the same damage though, regardless of like whatever target it hits. I'm gonna go ahead and hit this one now. This one, there you go. Yeah, I believe it only targets just 1 other target, not multiple. Not too bad. It's your main DPSing skill. It doesn't cost any spirit, no cooldown. Next we have Fragmented Star, which I do not have binded. Let me go ahead and bind it real quick. Bring that over here. Okay, Fragmented Star, it shoots out a exploding star, which once upon reaching either a maximum distance, or if it collides with the nearest target, it will spread out and shoot a volley of stars all around it. This one only is affected by your right hand weapon, so your main hand weapon, which is this one right over here. Okay, it does a lot of damage, and it also isn't affected by wall collisions. So even if I were to throw the star this way, hang on a second, that went too far in. You'll notice, like, whoops, trying to see if I can get this to work. Yeah, there you go. So even if it's not affected by wall collision, so even if it goes into the wall, the stars will still explode, as opposed to like Lucky Stars, which even if I were to aim for that target right over there, it'll be blocked by the wall. So like this, or I'm gonna use something else. It would just be blocked by the wall, but the Fragmented Star can go through walls, actually. Kind of hard to exercise that right over here, just because we're kind of in a spot where, let me see if I can do it here. Oh yeah, there you go. I just throw it through a wall, but it still goes through. Now, while this skill is really powerful, it does a lot of base damage. It costs a decent amount of spirit. 20 spirit doesn't seem like much, but if you were to spam it quite a lot, the spirit starts to drain quite quickly. It definitely does a lot of damage, certainly a lot more than like the likes of Lucky Stars. But because it costs so much spirit, not many people like to use it. Instead, they like to use Shadow Cutter, but I'll get into that later. You have Star Chaser, which it essentially does, it says equips 4 homing weapons in each hand and throw them at 8 enemies up to 8 meters in front of you, which means, go ahead and try that right now. There you go. It's a targeting ability, which means it will chase after the target, as the name implies, it's Star Chaser. It will go after moving targets. So this is actually really good for mobbing. It hits up to 8 enemies, which with 4 weapons each. And it does 54% damage per hit, which counts for I think a total of like 200. It does cost a little bit of spirit and has a cooldown, but it's really good for just overall DPSing. Let's go into Star Flurry. Star Flurry is a burst form of Lucky Stars. It attacks just a single target and attacks them 86% damage 6 times, or at maximum anyway. And so that calculates up to about 480 or 490 or so percent. Go ahead and show you. Does a decent amount of damage. It has, I believe, the same cooldown as Star Chaser, yeah, so you can use both of them at the same time. Pretty good damage. It does roughly about the same as Lucky Stars, or in terms of just overall damage output. A little bit more though. Thrown Weapon Mastery, it increases the weapon attack of your weapons by 55.8%, so if I were to take points off, as you can see right here, we lost attack. Take off more. There you go. I'll show you guys skill builds in just a sec. Alright, Shadow Cutter. Shadow Cutter is a really interesting ability. It's also good for mobbing. Oh, it was right here. It throws a large star in one direction. This is only affected by your right hand, by the way. I should also mention that, my bad. The Star Chaser and Star Flurry are both affected by the weapon in each hand. The skill tooltip tells you which, whether or not the stars are affected by one hand or both, right here. Shadow Cutter is only affected by one, and it throws a large boomerang star, kind of like, oops, like this. And it just attacks all enemies in their path. Shadow Cutter also deals dark elemental damage. I believe Shadow Chaser also does dark damage, but it doesn't say dark damage, it just says 23% damage, but on the top right of the tooltip it says dark, versus Lucky Stars, which is elementless. There you go. It's got good mobbing coverage and a decent amount of damage, 324% in total. There you go. Also, Shadow Cutter does consume spirit, but nowhere near as much as Fragment Star, and due to the long cast time of this ability, it doesn't drain your spirit that much at all actually. If I were to hold this down, it should keep itself maintained quite a decent amount. See, there we go. And if I put on Shadow Chaser on the target, it will never drain spirit actually. Basically, it'll keep it at that specific point. There you go. Shadow Burst is a burst type ability, which also does dark damage, and it's affected by each hand. And it does a bunch of dark damage in a cone shape to a lot of enemies twice. And this also has synergy with Deathmark, which I'll show you in just a second. And this is a really powerful burst ability that has a lot of area coverage, and it also does a lot of damage. This is what it looks like. Unfortunately, it has a long cooldown. Oh, I should probably turn on the graphics a bit. I'm sure you guys want to see what it looks like. There we go. Has a decent cooldown, lasts 12 seconds, but it looks really cool, just the ability as a whole. There you go. Does a lot of damage, as you can see right there, almost about 100k. It also does bonus damage if the target is affected by Deathmark, which I'll show you in a bit. So here we have Soul Grind. I'm going to take points off here just so I can show you. There you go. Soul Grind is, throws a really large, like, saw type, like chainsaw, not chainsaw, but it throws a really large star that explodes in place, and it acts like sort of like a saw effect. Let me show you. Looks really, really cool. I actually like the animation. That's a lot. This is only affected by the weapon in your right hand, and it does dark damage as well, and it does 115% damage 3 or 5 times. Since these come off cooldown around the same time, they just throw them like consecutively, like that, for quite a bit of burst damage. Alright, and then let's keep going. Shadow Arts, it increases the damage of all dark damage abilities by a certain amount, so Shadow Cutter, Shadow Burst, Soul Grind, Shadow Web, and Mirror Image Darkblade. No, not Mirror Image Darkblade, Death Sentence, there we go. Okay. Put that back. And I should put 1 point into Dark Cloak. So Dark Cloak is kind of like Darkseid in MapleStory 1, where you would channel for a little bit and you would go invisible, and you would also just be able to walk around targets. They will not aggro onto you, You still can take damage, I believe. You also gain bonus movement speed, and additionally, the next attack out of Dark Sight will stun a target. This thing is immune to stuns, but when you pop out a stun, or Dark Sight, you will also stun them for a brief period of time. You also gain more spirit, so you can sometimes use this ability to recharge your spirit. But assassins, they don't use spirit that much, so no one really uses Dark Sight. However, you do need Dark Sight in order to access one of the most useful abilities in the game, in my opinion. 2 points, and then you gotta go into Mark of Death. So I call it Death Mark just because League of Legends. The way Mark of Death works is that all attacks against enemies with 30% health or less, or not all of them, but you have a chance to hit them with a debuff for 6 seconds that makes them take 10% bonus damage from all sources. Not just your own. So if you have Death Mark on a target, all of your party members, or not even your party members, every single source of damage that they take, no matter where it's coming from, will be 10% stronger, which is really, really good for bonus DPS. Okay, Death Sentence, it summons 3 mirror images. Let me go ahead and get more points for that. Okay, the way Death Sentence works is a build off of Death Sentence, or Death Mark. Let me show you right here. So it sends out 3 shadows, kind of like Shadow Chaser, and they'll go after up to 8, it'll go after up to 3 enemies, and it'll do a little bit of damage, but the thing that it does is that it actually procs Death Mark on the target regardless of how much HP they have. So Death Mark would only proc on targets that are under, what the hell? Death Mark will only proc on targets under 30% HP. If you're wondering whether they're under 30%, each of these little like spokes on the HP bar are 10%. So after it drops under this one, then Death Mark should activate, but with Death Sentence you can proc it no matter what HP they're at. This is what it looks like. So they have like a blacker thing on top of them. While this ability does add an extra stack of Death Mark, it's got a long cooldown and it's not very practical, so even if you do go the Death Mark build, not many people go Death Sentence. It's just not the most important ability out there. This one, on the other hand, Fatal Strikes, is one of the best buffs in the game. Probably. Because it guarantees you get 100% critical hit rate for up to 17 seconds. So I'm going to use my normal rotations of abilities. Sometimes they'll hit a critical hit here and there, like there's one right there, there's another one right there. But with Fatal Strikes, it always crits every single attack, and if you stack a lot of critical damage on an assassin, you can do a lot of damage. It's really, really good for just getting a huge stream of burst damage, and if you combine this with the Runeblader's Honing Runes, you can do so much extra damage, which is why Assassin is one of the best single instance burst damage DPS classes in the game. This is really, really good. I love it a lot. Shadow Web, let me go ahead and get more points again. I'm not too big a fan of it. It's kind of impractical, or it's just like very counterintuitive for like the class, because the way it works is that you summon a exploding shadow clone almost, and then it'll explode and shoot a web out that it binds up to or attacks like nearby targets, and then it puts like a kind of a dot on them, and it also reduces their movement speed and their jump power. But what I don't understand is why does it involve us going up close? Because assassins, we want to keep our distance. We're not tanky like berserkers and knights. So risking your life getting up close just to do this, back away, and then it does a little bit of damage but not so much, I just don't find it to be very useful. On the other hand, Mirror Image Darkblade is not that bad. So this is really good on stationary targets because it does a lot of damage. You place a spot on the ground that has a little area, let me show you actually. This, okay. And any targets to step on it will take a lot of damage. So it says to scale Brand's enemies, reducing their accuracy by 22 for 10 seconds, and all attacks dealt to branded enemies have a 30% chance to summon an additional mirror image to attack them for more damage. So this is not too bad. It has a pretty moderately long cooldown of 40 seconds, and you do need to spec into Shadow Web, which is kind of a waste. Actually, you only need to do 2 points, but this is not too bad in terms of damage, and it places a trap down, similar to how you would play Shadow Web. But this one can do quite a bit of damage. Let me show you how it works. I hope that hits. There you go. Okay, it explodes, and then when you start attacking, you'll see these like weird little, like sometimes you see these like little shadow ninjas that go in and attack. It's good for amplifying your DPS for a tiny bit. Although, like I said, I don't think it's that useful. No one really uses it too much. Some people do. For if you have like multiple assassins, one assassin specs into DPS, one goes into Deathmark, and the other one goes into Shadow Web. It works, but it's very situational. Okay, and that's all their skills. So I'm going to show you 3 different builds that you can go. So the first one is single target DPSing, which is this left column right here. So you want to max out your lucky stars. You want to put 5 points into Fragmented Star. You don't use it, but you have to for to get some of the skills here. And then you want to put a few points into Star Chaser and more points into Star Flurry. Star Flurry is much stronger than Star Chaser because Star Flurry is more for single target DPS. Then you want to put a couple points into Thrown Weapon Mastery. Some people don't, even if you do go for the single target build. Assassins do not like to go for the Thrown Weapon Mastery just because it kind of falls off later on, but I like to go for it. Okay, and then you would max out Shadow Cutter, Fatal Strikes, and then Shadow Burst. And that's your build right there. That's the single target one. Now, people who don't go for Thrown Weapon Mastery, instead of doing Thrown Weapon Mastery, they would just spec into Soul Grind. It is, once again, it's preference. I prefer Thrown Weapon Mastery a little bit more, but I might do some DPS testing later. Now, the other build, kind of a similar concept in which you want to put points into just some of your basic attacks, but you want to spec into Death Mark. So once again, put a couple points into Lucky 7, or actually you want to max it out. Both that and Shadow Cutter with Soul Grind. Max Fatal Strikes. No matter what build you're going, you always want max Fatal Strikes. It's like so important for your DPS. 2 points into Dark Cloak, points into Death Mark. And you put points into Soul Grind. And then you can either go for Death Sentence or Shadow Arts. I prefer Shadow Arts because Death Sentence is not that great. Or if you want to, you can also go Mirror Image Darkblade. These are the other two builds. So the first one is more DPS oriented Death Mark, which is like this, because this build doesn't necessarily require your other weapon or your offhand weapon to be that strong. Whereas, because like you have a lot of skills that only attack with one, like Shadow Cutter and Soul Grind. However, this is the other option, is that you can go Shadow Web and Mirror Image Darkblade. So this is a more utility-oriented Death Mark build. This is just the most important ability that you want to go for, because 10% more damage from all sources, it actually starts to add up quite a bit. So that covers all of these skill builds. It depends on what you want to go for like, as you know, in terms of like what build you want to go, because it's circumstantial. Most of the time when you're just like out doing your own bosses or like hard dungeons, you want to go for single target DPS. But when you're in boss party, like especially in Chaos Raids, one assassin should always be speccing into Deathmark. If you're the only assassin, then you should spec into Deathmark no matter what. There we go, let's get my old skills back. Let me respec, 1 sec. Get that out, and we are good. Keyboard configurations, it's person to person, you know, it's case by case basis. I am more comfortable with this, but there's one thing I do want to show you guys. Go ahead into the character box right here. And there's macro setting. You can macro keys, and what a lot of assassins like to do is straight up just put every single skill onto one key. You wouldn't want to do that on other classes like Wizard or Berserker, because like some of the skills, they require a lot of spirit. But for an assassin, the only thing that takes up a lot of spirit and it drains it in a consistent pace is Fragmented Star, but no one uses Fragmented Star. Any high spirit consumption skill like Shadow Burst and Soul Grind, or even like Star Flurry and Star Chaser, are cooldown based, which means if you macro everything into one key, you'll always be casting Lucky Stars and Shadow Cutter. And then when these abilities come off cooldown, they will be used. So this is what you do, just hold down the A key. Then it'll keep, oh I should probably, let me do it on these guys so I don't run out of spirit. There you go. Just hold down the A key, and then whenever these abilities come off cooldown, they will be used right away. So yes, there's no skill involved. I misunderstood Assassin being a relatively difficult class, not in terms of like mechanical execution, but more just like making sure you don't die, because Assassins are very squishy. They can definitely take a lot of punishment if you're not careful with them. But overall, still, some people do like to macro their skills, some people don't, just because they like to go for like other skill builds. But for me, I also at first initially did not want to macro my skills because I didn't feel comfortable with macroing, until I realized you just do this, and then it just became so much easier. There you go. You can macro Fatal Strikes, but sometimes you want to wait until you use it just in case the boss is like about to jump or go to like another phase. Okay, let's go into what else you want to go for. As for stat specking, luck. Now, I understand a lot of people do spec into critical hit rate because like, oh my goodness, look at every time I spec into crit rate, it raises attack stat by 8. You need to understand that spec and crit rate, while it does inflate your attack quite a bit, it's not the right way to build your assassin, because the way attack works, it's a very arbitrary statistic. It's calculated by weapon attack, physical attack, magic attack, crit rate, and crit damage. But it doesn't necessarily determine how much damage you do. So what you should do is spec into luck. It only increases your attack stat by just a tiny bit, so you might be thinking like, oh no, I'm losing out on attack. Trust me, don't trust this. It doesn't always indicate how much damage you'll be doing. Luck is more important. And if you need proof, just go ahead and go into the rankings, head over to the assassin dart set, and every single assassin, top assassin, specs into luck, not critical hit rate. There you go. Luck, 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 and luck. I still don't know why critical hit rate increases your attack so much. My speculation is that the system assumes that a good portion of your attacks will be doing a critical hit rate. So let's say you critically strike 40% of the time, right? The attack stat will factor in 40% of the time you'll be doing critical hit rates, but it's not consistent enough to be reliable. Just overall, don't do it. It's a big beginner's trap. People think like, oh, I spec into crit rate and oh my goodness, it gives me so much attack. No, that's not true. You just want to go into your main primary stat. That's the only stat you should be going for. As for how you want to build your assassin from bonus attributes, piercing, physical piercing, boss damage. If you want to go attack speed, you can, but critical damage. Critical damage is super important on assassin, more so than any other class in the game. Reason being is because we do a lot of critical strikes, but also because fatal strikes gives us 100% critical hit chance. So if you have very high critical damage, you'll be doing so much more DPS. Some people like to go for critical damage, some people like to go for boss damage and piercing. I say go for a mix of everything. Like, for instance, my earrings has 160 crit damage and 3% piercing, but then I have critical damage or I have piercing and boss damage, and then I have crit damage and boss damage. So I like to go for a little bit of everything. Okay, that should be everything. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section below, and any other experienced assassins who want to add a few more tidbits, feel free. You're more than welcome to. But for now, that should be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care.